There we go.
Hello.
How's it going?
It's going well. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Can you?
Yep. Just get this adjusted here.
Oh,
All right.
awesome.
So should we get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Perfect. So I guess to introduce the format for everyone, we'll start off. I think we'll just introduce ourselves and we'll get into some injuries that you've had as a climber and talk about those. And you've had some unique ones as well.
Yeah, some freak ones.
We'll field some questions. So whoever's signed on, dump your questions into the chat. We'll field some of those questions, and then we're going to get interactive. I brought a bunch of different rehab tools that mostly for the fingers and wrists. You got some too?
Yeah, just got the rubber band.
Perfect. And yeah, we'll go through as best we can in this format some exercises. But do you want to start and introduce yourself? I'm sure everyone here knows you, but if you want to intro yourself, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I'm Felipe Camargo. I'm from Brazil. I'm 29, getting old. Professional climber. Started climbing when I was 10 years old, so almost 20 years climbing. And yeah, I'm sponsored by Tenaya. I've been traveling a lot to Spain, where I met everyone there from Tenaya and the guys, and yeah, it's been a good time.
It's been an adventure.
Yeah, I had my fair amount of injuries, so let's talk about those.
It sounds good. And I'll just kind of briefly intro myself as well. So my name's Jared Vagey. I'm a doctor of physical therapy, a professor at the University of Southern California, and I wrote the book Climb Injury Free. And I specialize and see a lot of rock climbers. And my passion is rock climbing and treating climbers and diagnosing, like figuring out how certain climbers have injuries and how to prevent them from occurring.
Yeah.
But let's dive into it. So if you were to say probably the one injury that like sticks in your head, the first injury that you think about in your climbing career, what's the one that kind of sticks out for you?
I would say my elbow. The epicondylitis on my elbow. Yeah. Classic. Because I never had to stop climbing because of it. Never got to a point that I'm like, okay, I have to stop. But it's always there, and it's always bothering me. And sometimes I have to change my training because of it. Like I can't campus board. I can't do like one arm pull-ups or like, pure power exercises. I can't do it. So I think that's the one that annoys me the most. It's not the most serious one that I've had. I had two like pretty serious injuries that were all like caused by impact. But the one that always comes to my mind, I think, is this one that really annoys me all the time.
All right, well, let's jump into that first then. And so show us and everyone like where on your elbow that injury is.
Let me sit my phone here so I can use my hands. So I think it's a classic one, a lot of climbers have. It's like right here in the elbow.
So on the bone on the inside of the elbow.
Really block off or something. It really, hurts there, and it's always like bothering me like right there. Right here. Yeah,
so that bone, it's called the medial epicondyle. And something that's interesting, so, a lot of people are listening now, as well as for you too, there's several different muscles that attach there. So what I find fascinating with climbers, there's these muscles that attach there. If you can see my hand, there's the muscles that flex our wrist, and they come down, they attach all the way down there. There's one muscle that flexes our fingers, and it comes down, and attaches all the way at that point. And then there's a muscle that actually rotates our palm inwards. And that muscle that rotates attaches there. So the fascinating thing about, So fascinating thing about injuries with climbers is you kind of have to do preventative exercises or even rehab exercises for the one of those that affects you the most. because if you think about it, if this muscle is the one that bothers you the most, you want to target that. If the rotation one is the one that's most affected, you target that one as well. So yeah, in general, like, is there anything that you do to help it? Like, is there anything specific that you do, or do you just modulate your climbing?
I watch my climbing, and when it's really bad, I actually talked a lot with Melissa Leneve about it, because she had this injury for a while, and she gave me some tips, some exercises, you know, to like hold the weight and like flat, you know, like like with a hammer, or like with some weights. I did a little bit of those, but yeah, but not much really. And I always
and really like,
it's hurting a lot, and then like now that it's back to normal, I don't do it anymore. So
yeah, it's once that you feel it less, then go back to normal climbing. But you really nailed it, because that's one of the key exercises that taking a hammer, taking a wine bottle, taking something that has some leverage, and then just rotating your palm up. And that's what we were talking about. That gets that pronator muscle that, you know, that attaches into that area. And then the two other exercises is really kind of these exercises for the fingers, which are eccentrics, and then ones for the wrist as well. You know, so you kind of get all three of those that are affected. But yeah, those are some nagging injuries, and they're kind of tough to deal with. They last a long time.
Oh, it's not like an injury that is that bad that you have to stop climbing, but you know, it's always there.
Yeah. Well, tell me more then. I know you've had some traumatic injuries, like some not so common ones. Like, and they're really interesting. Those are ones that, like, not the most common climbing injuries. So do you want to jump into maybe some of those that you've had?
So I broke my scaphoid.
Point a finger to it so everyone can kind of see that, so like right in that snuff box.
It was right here.
Yeah.
Like this little bone right on top here on my thumb. You know, the pain felt like it was right here.
Yep. And tell us about how you did that one.
I injured it playing soccer. I was the goalkeeper, and I took a ball really hard on the tip of my fingers, and it bent it backwards. And yeah, I felt it right away. I was like, "Oh, that's not normal." And next day it was swollen a little bit, and hurting a lot. So I went to the doctor. He did an X-ray and said it was nothing.
Yeah, and those are commonly missed on an X-ray.
Yeah, said I should just take some pills, some, you know, anti-inflammatory, and rest for a week. And I did that and got back into climbing and kept hurting, but it wasn't too painful. And I had a comp. I had two things to do, actually. I had a video for Red Bull with David Lama in Brazil, in Rio, that we climbed the big wall in Rio. And I had a national comp the next week. So I just kept climbing and training normally. And I climbed on it for like a month until I couldn't.
Climb straight on it for a month.
Yeah, I couldn't. I would like tape my wrist, you know, because it would help a little bit.
Yeah, to give some stability.
Yeah, but it was really painful still. I couldn't like really pinch, use my thumb, you know. Yeah. So yeah, I climbed the big wall with David. Competed in the national comp, won the comp, and then after the comp,
with a broken scaphoid.
Yeah, after the comp, I was like, no, I have to do something about it. So I went back to the doctor, and then he did an MRI and saw that it was broken.
So then what were the next steps? So they diagnosed it. They said you have this broken bone in the wrist, the scaphoid. Yeah. You're climbing and sending and winning comps
for a month. Yeah.
Yeah. So you get bonus points, the little asterisks in the in the books. So then what did you do?
So yeah, then they told me that it was like a hard bone to heal. They told me all this scary stories that, you know, it didn't heal up so well, so it was never good again, and then people had to get surgery, and I was like really worried because I climbed on it for a month. But then the next step was just, you know, we put on a cast, and I had a cast for 2 months.
And that was custom molded, like a thermoplastic cast?
Yeah, a thermoplastic one. So I could it would only cover my thumb and my wrist, so I could still climb with almost 4 fingers, you know. And I had a trip to Spain 3 months
Oh, so
later.
you were climbing in the cast?
Yeah, I had a trip to Spain. I would go to Margalef to try Gancho Perfecto. So I didn't want to stop training. So it was perfect because I could train a lot on those fingers, just the pockets, you know. So I never really stopped training. I just couldn't move my wrist so much and I couldn't use my thumb. But I kept training on it for like 2 months, 3 months.
And then what was the progression? So then you got off the thermoplastic cast, right? You weaned off
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah, and then it was weird because I felt my thumb was super weak, you know, after and super stiff, like not moving it for 2 months.
Yeah.
It was a long process. I remember I got to Spain within, I don't know, almost 3 months after the I started the treatment, and I still couldn't really use my thumb. I was slowly getting back into climbing with my thumb. I did a lot of physio, a lot of PT, just a lot of exercises with the band, a lot of exercises for the wrist like this. Yeah, it was a long process. It was hard, a hard injury to come back.
Yeah. Was it hard to get back to pinch strength as well with that?
Yeah, yeah. I felt like for a few months, I couldn't like really squeeze super hard. You know, even going like this would hurt a lot.
Yeah. But that's fully recovered, right?
Yeah, yeah. That was like 3 years ago or 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you had I know you had an interesting injury as well, like this one to the thumb. Do you want to get into
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. The other hand, then
Like a fluke
I went.
injury.
Yeah, I went to the Psycho Comp in Salt Lake City to compete in the comp, and in one of the times I jumped from the top of the wall, which is 15 meters, I think 55 foot, right, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I jumped from the top of the wall, and I fell perfectly, but I had my hand like this, to hit the water, and my thumb like twisted backwards.
Like hyperextended back.
Yeah, yeah, and then I actually broke the ligament, ruptured the ligament on my thumb, like the one that that you open the finger.
So what was the process for that one
So
after the injury?
it was almost the same thing. Like I had, I also used the same cast, but this time I didn't have anything super important, so I actually stopped climbing. And yeah, I had to not climb for like 2 months.
And then you went through physio to
Yeah,
rehabilitate that injury.
yeah. So be careful, people out there that are jumping on the water. Close your fist. Do a fist.
Yeah.
Your hands.
Fist close. Protect your thumb.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So you've had these kind of thumb kind of wrist type injuries and this kind of inside elbow injury. And have you had anything in your fingers, or have your fingers been pretty solid?
I had when I was really young, because I started climbing super young, and I started climbing at 10, and I think at 14 I was training a lot. I had a stress fracture here.
Yeah, stress fracture.
Yeah, in this finger, like right here.
Yep.
But that's pretty common, right? When you're a kid and training a lot and just crimping really hard.
Yeah, developing climbers, I mean, it's, there's so much psych, and you just want to climb all the time on bones that are developing. And that's very common injury for youth climbers kind of coming up.
Yeah, but other than that, I've been pretty lucky with my fingers.
Like, that's good.
Do a lot of the exercises with the band,
Yeah, let's check it out.
Yeah, I just do a lot of the normal. Let's see. Just the normal to warm up, like every day before climbing, and also after a little bit, just like this.
Nice.
I feel like this is really good. Every time it starts hurting a little bit, I focus on doing it a lot more. and it heals back. You know, I feel like, you know, getting this strong too. You know.
Yeah,
Really
and
helps.
it's nice because you also have your thumb involved in that, so it's also you know kind of stabilizing the thumb as well.
Yeah, I go like this.
Nice. So you do that right before you climb.
Yeah, and then also on rest days, sometimes I just get it at home and do it a bunch too.
Like watching TV or relaxing and just.
Yeah, in the couch,
And
laying
how
down.
long do you do it for?
I don't know. I kind of do like by, you know, I do like a few reps, you know, do like 15 or 20 and then rest and do again like 5, 6 times or.
So do it like kind of based on intuition, and that's nice because that it warms up the extensor tendons and then the muscles in the back of the forearm, the extensors, which kind of oppose or antagonize all that flexing, you know, that we're doing with our fingers when we grip. There's a nice, yeah, and there's an exercise that's interesting as well. What I noticed with a lot of climbers, you know, we're so strong in our finger flexors. Like that's what, you know, that's what we train. You know, it's yeah, and so we want to balance that out. And strengthening the finger extensors is huge. And then another thing is also the finger, they're called ab and adductors, or they're the interosseous muscles, and they're the ones that actually bring our fingers to the side. And when that one's important is actually when we're doing moves that aren't directly, you know, vertical. It's when we're doing like a Gaston, or, you know, we have a side pull. And there's some really interesting ways. I brought some little tools to play around with. But to strengthen those, I take any guesses what this is?
This is a balloon, huh? Like
Yeah,
yeah.
so I take a balloon and I fill it with rice, you know, because you can kind of customize these, you know, how you would do a rice bucket. But essentially then taking the balloon, and this is really hard to do. And you can do a short lever like between the fingers and basically trying to squeeze the balloon.
That's cool.
And then this kind of harder lever trying to squeeze the balloon. You get a bunch of them, get some balloon fingers, and then just, you know, start squeezing side to side. But this is a really nice way to warm up those muscles are actually in the hand, those kind of interossei as well that I found. And it's easy to do, right? You just find a balloon and fill it with some sand.
That's cool. That's cool. I'm glad.
Yeah, it's a simple one to do. What do you do to keep your fingers warm? Like if it's, you know, cold sending temperatures, or if, you know, how's your blood flow to your fingers? Some climbers, their hands are quite warm. It's not a big deal. Some, they need to spend a lot of time getting blood flow down there. What do you do for that?
All the time. I actually have a hard time climbing when I go to Europe. So I do a lot of, for like elbow combat, for example. I would always get like really cold fingers when I tried from the ground on the good days. And it was kind of like a battle, like how to stay warm, you know, how to, I remember I developed this routine on the route that I would go up until halfway of the route, actually like uh, grabbing on draws, doing a few moves, not really trying, so I didn't get tired. And then I also had on my chalk bag those hand warmers, you know, for skiing.
Yep, exactly, yeah.
Because on the rest, you know, the rock's so cold that if you're resting, you're not really climbing, you're gonna get cold fingers again. So I would like go.
Do you have that in your chalk bag for when you're sending, or just when you're warming up?
When I'm sending, yeah.
Wow, yeah.
So I would like go up halfway of the route and then just come down and try right away. I would even like take my shoes off, just pull the rope and try. Because I found that it was, for that route specifically, it was the right balance of, you know, I could warm up, grabbing some of the holds and not getting tired, come down and try it. Because, you know, when you feel the blood's already flowing and you're warm. Because sometimes if I just climb on easier routes that I don't have to crimp so hard, I didn't feel warm enough, you know.
Yeah, and that's oh sorry, go.
And then using the hand warmers in the chalk bag just helped in general too. You know, when I'm resting and stuff like that, my fingers wouldn't go back to cold. You know.
Yeah, and that's actually, it's fascinating what you said that, because when you were saying like, oh, I don't warm up on easy routes because I don't really feel like I'm getting that warm. That's
Yeah.
actually what the research shows. Dr. Andreas Schweizer out of Germany or out of Europe, he actually did a paper which was fascinating, and he measured how many climbing moves it takes to warm up the pulley ligaments in your
Oh,
fingers,
wow.
you know, essentially. And what he showed is they have to be progressively difficult. So you have to be climbing things that are actually challenging your fingers, and
Yeah.
then doing 100 moves or 50 cyclic loads is, so 50 on each, you know, on each hand, is enough to do so. So it's interesting that you mentioned that, because you kind of have this intuition that, you know, you
Intuition.
have
Yeah.
to climb a little bit harder.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's always that balance, like, oh, I don't want to get tired, you know, but also I don't want to be like not warmed up enough so I can get injured or I can just get cold fingers and not feel the holes and fall, you know.
Yeah, and the blood flow is huge. I mean, that's, you know, everyone listening to this, we know it's really hard to send, let alone climb with freezing fingertips. But it's oftentimes when conditions are optimal. So
Yeah.
it's, yeah, so it's really interesting. I sometimes recommend too, there's mechanical hand warmers, not to take up the route, but they're like
Yeah.
these little boxes that then like at the crag, you have like kind of the mechanical hand warmer that put a little more power. You know, they give a little bit more output as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so those are some good ideas to keep the fingers moving, keep them warm.
That's cool. I've never seen those.
Yeah, they're I mean, they're maybe like US dollars or maybe like $30 or so. So it's obviously
That's
it's a
cool.
little bit more of an investment,
Yeah. So
so
worth it.
forth, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's worthwhile.
Yeah.
There's interesting too. There's like during the day, I'll sometimes use like, I don't know if you've seen like these acupressure rings. They're
Yeah.
by no means like a game changer. You can basically do it on your own, kind of like, you know,
Yeah.
warming up your fingers. But as a
Yeah.
fidgety thing, they're kind of nice to kind of bring them, you know, in and out, you know, just to come on the finger, just to create a little bit of circulation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I've tried those before. I feel that it helps, huh? Helps a lot to keep the, the blood flowing, right?
Yeah. And then oftentimes what I'll do, I mean, I'll just do, you know, our large muscle groups are the ones that pump the most amount of blood through our body when they contract. And so just doing like squats and swinging the arms back and forth, you know, just to get things moving, are other ways. But yeah, I mean, it's so important to warm up the fingers because they're far from the heart. They're, you
Yeah.
know, just as far or almost as far as our feet, depending on your
Yeah.
apex,
And it's
from our
funny.
heart.
It's funny because I don't get cold climbing. Like my body, like I don't feel like it's hard for me to warm up. But the fingers, my hands get cold. You know. So yeah,
Yeah.
I always thought if it had any correlation with anything else, you know, like, do you know to tell me that?
Yeah, there's a syndrome called Raynaud's syndrome. And it's when the extremities, like the fingertips and the toes get cold, but the rest of the body is fine. And it's really common. And I see it a lot with climbers. And I actually, you know, there's a test for it. I actually take a temperature gun and I measure the blood flow, you know, from the fingertips to the wrists to the forearms and so forth, and create a ratio. But yeah, it's, some people have it, some people don't, and there's just
Uh-huh.
ways to mitigate it. That, you know, ways that you found and ways that climbers find to just stay warm and kind of ready to send. Do you tape your fingers at all for pulley? Like if you've strained a pulley or have a little bit of
Yeah.
discomfort, or do you mostly go
Sometimes,
natural?
sometimes I try to avoid it. I try to
Yeah.
avoid climbing with tape because of injuries. Of course, climbing with tape because of skin, but I try to avoid climbing with tape because of injuries because I feel like we just mask it, you know, and then just gonna get more injured, right? I try to recover it.
Yeah, you want to feel your fingers, and you want to be able to climb the amount that you can climb while doing it safely. So it's
Exactly.
kind of a lot of intuition on your part of saying, maybe do a different route or different project at that time.
Yeah. I try to not, if I feel like I have to tape my fingers so I'm able to climb, I try to not climb or climb something else.
Yeah, definitely. What else for fingers? Is there anything else, any tricks that you do to kind of keep your fingers strong and healthy, or anything?
Yeah, every time I don't climb for a week or any little break that I take, if like after a big project or after a trip, if I rest for like a week, I just try to make sure the first climbing day back on, I don't really try anything too hard. I do a lot of hangboarding, just easy hangboarding, just really activating again the fingers, and a lot of easy climbing, just something that I've learned over the years. And like as I'm getting like older, before I didn't care about anything, just climbing. But now I'm 29, I started to feel like if I stop for a week, I feel like I lose more, and I feel like my fingers, they can feel it, if I jump right back into hard climbing. So I try to do at least one day of like getting back into climbing, So yeah, hangboard, easy climbing, just really activating the fingers and everything.
Yeah, and there's such this almost like neuromuscular connection between just feeling the fingers being strong, at certain holds, and getting back into that, especially with the fingerboard.
Yeah. Or like even now, like I climbed pretty hard last week. I trained pretty hard, and then Friday I didn't train. Saturday and Sunday also didn't, because I had some stuff to do, and so I had 3 days without climbing. And I also like had a barbecue with some friends here. I drank a little bit. So today I'm gonna climb, and I'm not gonna climb hard. I'm just gonna do hangboards. I'm just gonna get back into it. Just get my fingers in the game again. Even only 3 days after I only 3 days rest.
Yeah, no, that's smart. There's one thing that I was able to convince my wife on, that this was a year-long project, but I was able to get a hangboard in the bathroom, and there's actually 2 hangboards in the bathroom. And what I started doing, which is interesting, is because you mentioned you kind of do this like kind of low load, kind of like light hangboarding, and so my biggest habit that I do all the time is brush my teeth. Every time before I go to bed, right? I brush my teeth. And so I've linked it to a habit. And essentially every time after I brush my teeth, I jump on the hangboard with body weight unloaded, just very light, and just kind of hang there and just, tell my fingers, I play a little bit of piano key on the, on the holds, and just get them woken up a little bit. So I don't know if that's a good tip or not, but as many places you can put hangboards if you can convince your significant others.
That's cool.
All right,
I've heard of other people who do that as well.
It's
or like
what?
have it under the door of their room, and every time they go by, they like hang a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good reminder. And I actually I tried climbing quite a bit, so I made these crack blocks as well that are basically kind of hand jam size. And so that's my other kind of new hobby, is just get a little bit of hand jam in before bed at very low load. Just relax.
Those are hard.
All right, so I brought a little hand model. I wanted to make this a little bit interactive.
Yeah.
And so, we're talking a lot about fingers, and some climbers here, they're watching, they've probably had finger injuries. And I just wanted to demo this and show, so this is the hand, obviously, maybe it's a little easier to see here. And as we see with the finger, I'll show the middle finger, we have these like long tendons that go through. We have a blue one, the red one, and then we have these kind of 5 beige ligaments that go over the top, and these are the pulleys. And so this is the example of one of the ruptured pulleys that you can see here. This one kind of came out there.
Yeah.
And so when rehabbing pulley injuries, you know, I'm not sure how common these are overseas, but we'll fabricate these like pulley protection splints. And this is when there's like a true, like someone just popped the ligament in their finger, they felt a pop, they may have gotten an ultrasound or a clinical diagnosis, and then these guys just like slide right over, you know, and go right, maybe I'll put it on top here, and go right on the finger, you know, for 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes 6 to 8 to just stabilize it. So that's an often, you know, if anyone's watching and has actually had a serious pulley injury, these will oftentimes be custom molded, kind of like those thermoplastic splints you had for your thumb. But the key here, they have these like little bulges on the side. And you could see there's this little kind of collateral bulge, and that allows when you really push it down that it doesn't compress the arteries and the veins and so forth. So these are kind of a pretty good utility if someone has a serious pulley sprain or injury.
If you rupture it completely, you have to get surgery for sure, or no?
No. So the amazing thing about climbing is there's been a whole body of research, and there's a lot of researchers, particularly in Europe, you know, Dr. Volker Schoeffel and a series, Andreas Schweizer, that have really showed in studies, if you rupture a single pulley ligament, right now it is not recommended to have surgery. You actually, you get a thermoplastic splint made, you have that on 6 to 8 weeks, you follow a very regimented protocol. Now, if you rupture multiple pulleys, now that is a different story, and you immediately, you know, obviously you always should get a consult with an ortho, but you immediately for that one would go in for a consult. But yeah, so it's very interesting. So it used to be, you know, you get a pulley rupture, full rupture on the table with surgery. Now that's actually not the first option, which is a good thing for, at least for our field, because it can be rehabilitated.
And what's the recovery time? You said 6 to 8 weeks with the ring, but then to get back into climbing?
Yeah, 6 to 8 weeks with the ring, and then it depends on the grade. So how they grade pulley sprains is grade 1 is just like a little strain. And I see a comment, can a ruptured pulley grow together?
Yeah, that's
okay. We'll talk about it in a minute. Grade 1, then grade 2 is you have, it depends on the area, but you have some like minor tearing. Grade 3 is full, and then grade 4 is multiple. And returning to climbing, so 6 to 8 weeks with the pulley splint on for kind of those grade 2, 3s. And actually have a protocol that I developed for when climbers can return back onto the wall. But it's a lot sooner than you think. And you can do a lot actually with this on, because essentially what it's doing is it is adhering the tendon to the bone. So just like when you injured your, you know, your thumb or your scaphoid, and you were, you know, with the scaphoid, how you were climbing, you know, with the cast on, you can add load to the fingers as long as it, you know, it is supported. So yeah, so there's good protocols out there, good research. But it really, it's this kind of phased system. So the first phase is you unload it, and you essentially unload it with this, or you've probably seen like a couple demos, like eventually you wean off of that onto like H-tape. So, you know, 2 centimeter by 10 centimeter kind of H-tape strip. And that basically unloads the ligament, kind of pulls it flush to the bone. And from there, then you work on mobility. And have you had any buddies or that have ruptured a pulley, and are there certain motions that are difficult for them to do that you notice?
Yeah, I actually have a friend that just ruptured it, and he's still wearing this ring thing, and he's still recovering his finger. But I've had other friends before, and I had some friends in Europe that have gotten surgery. Yeah,
exactly. So it's, you know, the hardest thing, you know, you unload it first, you then get mobility, and it's oftentimes really hard to get, especially actively. Yeah, this kind of like claw grip. And so really working on that motion to get the claw. And the way a lot of people cheat is they'll try and get the claw kind of rolling forward their fingers, but you essentially have to keep, you know, the fingers extended back and kind of pull in.
Yeah.
And yeah, regaining that mobility is key. And then eventually building up, you know, getting some circulation, rebuilding strength. And then it was interesting that you showed earlier the exercise for the extensors.
Yeah.
When someone actually ruptures a pulley, I actually take it like a little bit further, and I'll make this like carabiner little trick. And I'll take 2 fingers, so the one adjacent to the injured pulley. I'll put this on top of the tips of the fingers, and then have them go into a crimp and essentially pull down the carabiner, so it's creating some tension. And then lift those fingers. So they're essentially isolating out those injured fingers with a way to, you know, to train those extensors. So it's like a very specific way. It's not global, but it's very specific for that injured finger to just play around with.
So that would be if you had rupture on the middle finger, right?
Correct. Yeah. And exactly, you do middle finger and the adjacent finger. Now, let's say it's your ring finger. You can just do one finger as well and lock into that position and then lift. Right. But you notice the pinky goes with it. You ever notice that you try and lift one finger, but everything else? So it's actually a skill to train the fingers in isolation. And I don't know, are you able to flex your pointer finger down? Okay, cool. And flex your ring finger down. And then move your ring finger back and forth without moving your pinky.
The ring finger?
The ring finger back and forth, but don't let your pinky move. So it's a little bit, it's a challenge. So it's your brain is coordinating because all of your finger flexors, it's tough to do. All of your finger flexors share the same muscle belly. So you're essentially training each tendon in the finger to independently move. But when it moves, the tension from the other one is starting to pull it. It's called the quadriga effect, but it's a really fascinating kind of, you know, connection with our fingers.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna have you try a couple things that are interesting, and then we'll probably do some questions, you know, from people if they have them. But so these are just kind of fun little games to test we'll try this first one, our wrist and finger extensors' ability to isolate. Now, does this translate into injury prevention or climbing performance? Not necessarily, but it may be helpful to isolate independent fingers, almost like a pianist can isolate out independent fingers. So with this, the start is having the hands, and you can put it in front of your face, but I'll do it first, you can try, and essentially just lifting your middle fingers away, and then bringing your elbows up and trying to do the same. And the higher you bring your elbows, whoever's trying this, easy to do. And then as you start to bring your elbows up, it's what?
Even like this for me is not so easy.
All right.
So yeah.
And then bring your elbows up, and now it's going to get really hard.
Oh, really hard.
And I can see the shoulders are starting to come up. So this is a really interesting way to put, so it puts our finger extensors at a mechanical disadvantage. And it takes all of the tension. Usually the stronger you are as a climber, or the more forearm mass you have, the harder it is. That's why it's really hard for you, and obviously easier for me. But the more tension you have in your forearms, when you bring your arms up, it becomes a lot harder to create that lift. And it's an interesting way. You're trying, right?
So hard.
Yeah. It's an interesting way to try to train and turn on those finger extensors. And like a fun game, kind of on a downtime to play. And I almost think of it, I was going to say, you feel it through your wrist extensors. It's a nice way to train the muscles in the back of our forearm in kind of a unique position. And you can think about like if someone's doing like yoga to warm up for climbing, well, they can do that while they're in a down dog, and it may be easier to do when they're in a plank. And maybe to start turning those on, if someone's doing some warm ups like that. So it's kind of like a fun little,
And on the try to lift the finger.
Sorry, say again.
You have like a plank position, just try to lift the fingers.
Yeah, 100%. Yep, in a plank, if a handstand position is really, really, really hard, or even if it's like hard to do, you could do like a plank on a wall. It's like a little bit easier. Just put your hands down on the table, right? And just watch as you lift your fingers. But it's interesting. I always watch. There's some things that I look for in climbers. Like, go ahead, put your hand up to the screen like so. And one thing, there's a lot of variation between the size and the length of climbers' digits. So, for example, some climbers have exact same length of their pointer finger and their ring finger. Some have a smaller pinky finger. For you, can you tell like which one's a little bit longer with your fingers?
And look this one.
Yeah, so your middle finger is the longest.
Yeah. And
then there's a little bit of that kind of curve, in your pointer finger, which makes it appear as though it's not as long, right? And then your ring finger, is actually a little bit longer, than your pointer finger.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see and compare, on the other side. And so what's fascinating how I look at that, the other thing I look at too, and I'll go in a second, is going into this position, which is called ulnar deviation, and then going into this position, which is radial. And what I find is climbers, give that a try. Yep, plenty of position, good, and then radial. It's a decent amount of motion. And if you look at mine, I'm a good example of plenty of motion. That's like the end of that motion. And if you think about it, when climbers are climbing on a rock wall, if we don't have, for example, this motion, what has to happen is our elbow may slightly chicken wing up. And now maybe because a stiff wrist is happening, maybe there's a little bit of discomfort in the shoulder, right? And things like that. So it's fascinating to look at the fingers and the wrists with the fingers. If someone has a very short pinky finger, let's say I've seen this, like the pinky only goes up to like the middle joint. Well, maybe they're more susceptible to have a ring finger injury because its partner right next to it isn't close to it. So it's fascinating to kind of look at these small things. And the most interesting thing is more so just to see how it affects how someone climbs. Yeah. So you can see on the rock wall, two climbers can climb a route completely different because how their bodies are made up.
Yeah.
So should we do some questions from, I see we're getting some questions in from people, and to make it kind of interactive, should we answer some of the questions?
Let's answer that one about the pulley.
Which one?
If you can grow back in a wrong position or something, right?
Yeah, so most of it, it's interesting. Let me see. Okay, can a ruptured pulley grow together in the wrong position? So what's interesting with this is the biggest fear if you rupture a pulley, and let's say multiple pulleys, is I'm more concerned if the finger develops a contracture and doesn't get its full range of motion back. Yeah. That's more of a concern to me than the fibers of the ligament laying down in the perfect formation, because it's a mess. When you lie down scar tissue, almost imagine that you have like these really nice strands of spaghetti that are like wrapping around the finger, and then you injure it and you like throw the spaghetti at the finger, as it's, kind of healing, and you hold that together, with and I'm simplifying. I'm obviously simplifying, but we don't have spaghetti in our fingers, but you hold that together with some type of pulley protection splint, or you offload it, and they will be disorganized fibers. They're not going to have this perfect orientation, and that's fine. You have disorganized fibers, you train, you rehab them, and you can go back to climbing at your full strength or capacity, you know, through when you get through the rehab program. So I'm less concerned about disorganization of fibers, but more so, do you forget to do your range of motion and those types of things to kind of keep the fingers mobile? What other ones? Just shout out some questions. You can kind of read them out, and and people can submit as you get kind of questions in.
Let's see. That one is interesting.
Yeah. Let me see. There's a
pulley tears, but never an A2 pulley injuries. Is there something weak biomechanically that I can strengthen? Or perhaps I'm crimping in a way that puts a lot of stress on the A4.
Yeah, I mean, there's some specific ways to, you know, change the kind of hand position or unload for A2 versus A4. But some of it is based on kind of the mechanics of how our fingers are built. You know, maybe someone's ligament or, you know, A4 ligament is slightly higher than the other, maybe is a longer lever. But the H tape actually stabilizes both the A2 and the A4. So it is a good way to take load off of one or the other. But I typically don't have specific advice for one versus the other, how to differentiate. The one big thing is they're both caused by mechanical loads. So the A4 pulley has the flexor digitorum profundus that runs underneath it, which is like only one muscle, one tendon. The A2 has the superficialis and the profundus. So theoretically, maybe someone can be overusing the tip of their finger, and that could lead to maybe a little bit more of that A4. So training what's called the lumbricals, or the intrinsic muscles in the hand, it's almost this like weird kind of waving position, or almost people like training pinch blocks, can help train these intrinsic muscles in the hand to take stress off of the pulley ligaments.
Yeah. I have a question here. Something that the last thing that I've felt on my fingers was the ring finger. I feel like when I crimp, it really opens up from the others, goes to the side. You know, I don't know if I can show you, but
it like
yeah, see. And lately I've been having a little bit of pain, like right here. I feel like I want to pop the finger all the time like this, you know? You see it?
Yeah,
Yeah. And it's not...
let me just... You mentioned, so it almost like hyperextends, right?
Yeah. It doesn't hurt a lot, but sometimes when I start climbing, I feel a little bit of discomfort here. And it almost feels like I need to stop climbing and like pop it and then warm it up, and then it's gonna feel good. But sometimes when I'm getting like open-handed like this, I feel it almost feels like that's a little bit unstable here, or it could be that they say that hyperextends down, something like that.
There's maybe two mechanisms. So one is if there's some instability, and there's collateral ligaments that are actually on the sides. They're like right here and right here. And there's a little test that we do where we like push it from one side and then push it to the other. But you have to stabilize the joint and see if there is extra motion. And oftentimes climbers that have this, whether there's a project where you had to like really twerk your fingers, or crack climbers that are in really thin finger locks a lot, they may get a little bit of instability at that joint. And then the joint itself becomes a little bit inflamed. It's called capsulitis. And there's a little bit discomfort that kind of builds up in the joint. You almost want to like pop it to kind of relieve it. That's one potential. The second is if the finger flexor, this is the opposite of what we were talking before, but the long finger flexor that flexes this last part isn't as strong as the others, then the finger may hyperextend in that direction. And that constant kind of hyperextension, my finger doesn't do that, but that constant hyperextension that way, correct, going up that way, yes, like that. Almost like losing that crimp on that finger, then that can actually start, that end of the joint can also start to cause a little bit of discomfort as it kind of compresses or fulcrums the joint. And there's a tendon that goes over the top, the extensor tendon, that can kind of get pinched kind of right in that joint. So some interesting things, like when that comes on, I'll typically have climbers, when they're working on their crimp, to really focus on that one finger. And there's some different little tools, like taking a piece of string, putting it under that finger while you're hangboarding, and then trying to pull the string out, and then you press down on that string flat with that finger to try and just keep that one finger locked in. And there's like a bunch of like different orientations to play around. But most notably, what's most common with that is either some instability side to side or some instability going upwards. And the way that,
for me,
sorry, go for it.
For me, my case could be like the instability side to side, because I feel like I often don't use my pinky, and every time I crimp super hard, I feel like this finger, the ring finger, really opens up to the left.
Yeah, I just noticed that you did that, and it created this gap, like when you press down. Are you looking for a hold to show? Let's do it.
I need a small hold. This wall is the kids' wall.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you got some hard jugs over there.
Well, I don't know if you can notice, but look, it really opens up.
100%. So that separation,
always like that. A lot of
separation, which is so common. Here's the test of the exercises we showed today. Which exercise that involves a balloon would be really nice for that finger?
Yeah.
Right? So that would be basically making a smaller balloon, getting into that like crimp position, but then really squeezing down to decrease that gap between these two fingers. And that could be kind of a cool way to strengthen this. It's an interosseous muscle to stabilize the finger. Maybe the reason that you're having that, you're correct, is because the muscle in the hand may not be doing its job to bring your finger in the right position. Someone put like a Spock sign. Yeah, you climbing with the Spock sign. Yeah, so you want the opposite of the Spock sign. It's like a Star Wars reference.
Yeah, somebody said in the comment. So should I do that exercise before climbing, or just at home, just whenever I'm?
Yeah, so I'm a big proponent for motor learning, and motor learning is essentially if you can do something that is low threshold, it does not fatigue you. Almost like you're going up to like on your project send day, you're like warming up. If you do something low threshold before you climb, there's a greater likelihood that it's going to translate to when you climb. And essentially, I see you like trying, and it's probably less natural on that side.
Yeah.
I see it shaking a little bit too when you pull in. Yeah.
So hard.
And so then the advanced thing, there's actually some ways you can take a rubber band and you can put it, down on that joint as well to add some resistance, in kind of each position. And some different ways to kind of isolate it. But it's oftentimes a motor learning kind of principle. And when we're climbing on hard stuff, we're doing whatever is most natural for our fingers. And so it's all about training it and kind of getting used to that pattern. But hopefully that's a good kind of set of tips that ties in together the finger stuff.
Yeah, cool. Gonna try it out and I'll let you know.
Awesome. Well, I think we got all the questions in the chat, or the majority of them. Was there? I mean, let's maybe end with if there's one piece of advice that you can give climbers to prevent injuries, and this can be from your own experiences. It doesn't have to be. There's no medical advice. It's your own experiences. What would be your one piece of advice, that you'd want to give?
Well, if I could go back to me, 15 years ago, I would say stretch more and, do your exercises more when you're young and growing up, and don't just be focused on just climbing and training. I always hated that part. I always never stretched, never did you know, compensating exercises, and I just started doing when I got older.
Yeah, so maybe you could talk to your younger self, and or you know, those that are watching or listening that are younger or whatnot.
Yeah, maybe start
Yeah,
before you feel like you need it.
yeah, start it early. A little bit
Yeah,
goes a long way. You know, and I think
yeah,
my advice would be, we talked a lot about exercises and these kind of ways to prevent injuries, and talked about anatomy and some of your injuries. I think the key is really understanding climbing movement. And, you know, for example, you had mentioned you climb a certain way. You know, when you crimp, you know, one finger goes out to the side, and maybe that's the reason, you know, why the tip of the finger hurts. And maybe those, you know, people that are listening, you know, maybe they have shoulder pain, and maybe the elbow rides up, you know, when you're trying really hard, and maybe that's the reason. And so I think, like any sport, is just really paying attention
pay
to
attention.
the movement of climbing, especially when you're climbing like easy kind of warm up stuff. I think that would be my kind of last piece of advice.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Pay attention on your body and how you climb and watch you climbing, right?
For sure. Awesome.
Cool. I think that's it.
Cool.
I'll
Well, let's.
definitely, I'll definitely do those exercises and let you know how I feel. The finger.
Cool. Sounds good, man. All right. Take care, and
Yeah.
yeah, hopefully,
Thanks for the time. Thanks for doing this. Really cool.
yeah, and good luck with this upcoming year. I know there's been a lot of adapting, but I think
Yeah.
it's gonna be a good year for you.
Yeah. Hopefully, you know, things get back to normal soon and we can start traveling again. And yeah, I have a lot of projects in mind. So hopefully we can go try them.
All right. Take care.
All right. Cool. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.